Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Who Do You Serve Virtual at-Large Candidates Forum. My name is Reginald Black. I am the Advocacy Director for the People for Fairness Coalition. I'm a journalist, artist of Street Sense Media, the chairman of Focus Attitude Committed to Excellence, FACE, the founder of Velocity, and a lived experience appointee to the Interagency Council on Homelessness. Also joining me tonight as hosts are members of the Brookland Manor Coalition, Ms. Cheryl Brunson, who is a native Washingtonian and treasurer of the Brookland Manor Brentwood Village Residents Association. She is also a mother, grandmother, sister, and community counselor for anyone who needs a listening ear. Joining her is Ms. Minnie Elliott, a native Washingtonian, president of the Brookland Manor Brentwood Village Residents Association, a civil rights activist, a retired educator, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, and a great-great-grandmother. Also joining them is Ms. Yvonne Johnson, native Washingtonian, vice president of the Brookland Manor Brentwood Village Residents Association. Also a retired educator, daughter, mother, and grandmother to Ethan and Jasmine. Joining us as hosts is Mr. Bo Luther, who is a native Washingtonian, president of the Garfield Senior Residents Council, also co-founder of Hustlers to Harvesters, an urban farmer, carpenter, musician, mentor, also ANC candidate for single member district 1B03 and member of the DC District of Columbia Housing Authority Citywide Advisory Board. Also joining us is Ms. Shanta Hyde, president of the Park Morton Resident Council, a civil rights activist and owner of High Alert Preparedness, and also a mother. Before we get into how things are going to run tonight, I want to introduce Mr. Peter Landros, who is a American Indian movement leader in Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania. He's going to lead us in a land acknowledgement. So please join us in giving our land its just respects. Peter?
Hello, everybody. My name is Peter Landeros. I am a Pasquayaki Indian from Southern Arizona. I've lived here in Maryland, D.C. area the majority of my life. The land that we are on is Piscataway land. It's belonged to them since the beginning of time. If you're going to have discussions on rights of land and an easement, you have to include the indigenous people of the area. Chief Billy Tyak, who is the chief of the Piscataways, has given me permission to speak for him and in his absence. That's pretty much it right now. So,
thank you, Peter. Again, welcome to our Who Do You Serve Candidates Forum. The purpose for this particular forum is that we see in our city that there is a need to have conversations with impacted community members. We want to have a conversation with people that are directly impacted by any policy that is proposed by council members in our city. And of course, I would like to welcome our audience to our Who Do You Serve Candidates Forum. I want to thank our candidates, Jeanné Lewis, Christina Henderson, Will Merrifield, Jamin Chandler, and Monica Palacio for joining us tonight, who will be joining later.
Sander J. Rahman.
Chander J. Rahman. J. Rahman. Thank you. Excuse me. J. Rahman.
Chander.
All right.
Not Chandler. Chander.
Chander J. Rahman. Did I get it right this time?
Chander.
Perfect. All right, good. So how things are going to run is that we're going to have one opening question, and then we'll have 4 sections with a testimonial comprising of 2 questions each. Each candidate will have 90 seconds per question, and please adhere to that 90 seconds because our timekeeper will cut you off. I got a really good timekeeper for this, and we will be moving on to the next person at the end of 90 seconds. For those in the audience, if you have questions, please tweet your questions to both at Washington PFFC and at Brookland Manor Coalition with the hashtag Who Do You Serve? That's hashtag WHODOYOUSERVE. Hashtag Who Do You Serve? And with that, we are going to start off with just our hand raising and introduction round, of course. So the first question, which all you have to do is raise your hand. Raise your hand if you have visited a DC homeless shelter. Raise your hand if you have visited a DC encampment. All right. So we'll start off with our opening and our first question. Within your 90 seconds, you have the opportunity to introduce yourself. The question is, who are your constituents currently or in your most recent job? Who do you envision serving in your role as council member? And how will you be accountable to impacted communities? And we can start with, since I butchered his name, Chandler J. Rahman.
Thank you very much. Again, I'm Chandler J. Rahman. I currently serve as an ANC commissioner in Ward 6, Capitol Hill area, Barracks Row, Eastern Market. It's ANC 6B. I currently serve as the vice chair. I've been there for the past 8 years and worked with a lot of my neighbors and particularly on housing and really advocating that we are the affected party in terms of development, whether it's in Reservation 13 or there's a great swath of land between Potomac Gardens and Hopkins units and the water. And so there's a lot of land there that we're going to help make sure that a lot of that land gets put to good use and creates the more than 12,000 affordable units that the mayor's talked of. So my constituents right now are obviously Capitol Hill residents in 6B and 6A. However, I'm also an emergency planner for the past 18 years. And so my constituents have been schools, childcare centers, DYRS is one of my clients right now. So I go and ensure the safety of the residents there. And, I'm also working with a couple of Restore the Vote groups on restoring the vote for the jail. So my constituents are, those are my professional and personal constituents, but I see myself as a moderate who is going to cover the entire city. And I think Ward 6 is a microcosm of where the East and West come together. And so I want to be a representative of all DC, of all walks of life. And that's my background. I look forward to speaking to that further. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for that, Chandler. Next, we'll have Jeanné Lewis. Did I get it right?
You did. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeanné Lewis, running as an independent for the DC Council at Large. And I'm running because I have seen our city over the last several years being siphoned away because we're making decisions for a temporary town instead of our home. And that's what we're here tonight to talk about, is home. When I think about my constituents, I think about where I live. I live in Ward 7. So certainly folks east of the river have been left out of a lot of the decisions that have been made in the city. But there are pockets of people all over the city who are living the same experiences as people east of the river. As a council member, I seek to serve anyone and everyone who calls DC home. And we have not been making decisions for all of us who call DC home. Before I launched my campaign, I had vision and conversations in all 8 wards of DC to ask people what they wanted to see from our home. And this included public housing residents, this included homeowners, this included people of all ages and races, including youth, including seniors. You know, throughout my time in DC, I have served and talked to people in different constituencies. So I'm excited to be here, especially with the co-host from Brookland Manor. I attended a meeting at Jean Simon's house last year. It was the day before one of your court dates, and I heard a lot about what you've been going through and the fight that you're having. So I'm excited to hear from you and everyone else that's on the call tonight to talk about affordable housing. And the term we use is sustainable housing, because we know that housing is not affordable in DC. And so we want to make sure that we have sustainable housing for everyone across all income levels, again, who calls DC home. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will have Will Murrayfield.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's good to see everybody tonight. My name's Will. For the last 8 years, I've been a housing attorney at the Washington Legal Clinic for the Homeless. So my constituency has been working class Washingtonians that are at risk, that are facing displacement. I've represented tenant associations all across Washington, D.C. I fought on the front lines with people to prevent them from being displaced, to keep their housing affordable. And doing that work, what I've seen, unfortunately, is that way too often our local elected leaders are working directly with politically connected developers and actually giving them hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money and public land to build luxury units that working class people cannot afford. It's causing mass displacement. It's driving up rents for everyone. And we're dealing with this horrific family homelessness crisis on the back end of it. I'm running a campaign in direct opposition to that. I'm running to create truly affordable mixed income housing that actually pays for itself. I'm running to, that's called a social housing program. We'll talk more about that tonight, hopefully. I'm running on a jobs program to put people back to work post-pandemic, building the thousands of units of truly affordable mixed income housing we need to get us out of the affordable housing crisis, get money in people's pockets, get that money recycled back into the local economy to jumpstart this local economy post-pandemic. And I'm running to reinvest in quality public education to make DC public schools the best public schools in the nation, so every kid, no matter where they live, can get a world-class education. Look forward to talking more tonight.
Thank you. And finally, Christina Henderson. Did I get it right?
Yes, you did. And thank you so much for having me this evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is Christina Henderson, and I'm running for DC Council at large. Part of the reason that I'm running is because I believe we need a more equitable DC. The thread throughout my entire career has been about how do you help working families and children succeed, because I truly, truly believe that one zip code should not be a barrier to your opportunity for success. And unfortunately, in the district, we know that's not the case. And I feel like we need more council members who are focused in on policies that are going to make DC more equitable and sustainable for us all. I'm not currently in elected office, but I have been a dedicated public servant. I currently, in my day job, work in the United States Senate on behalf of residents everywhere, in particular in New York State, but I have been working on education, labor, workforce, postal, and census policy for the last 4 years in the Senate. Prior to that, I spent 5 years serving district residents, first at DC Public Schools, and then for 4 years at the DC Council. I was Councilmember David Grasso's first legislative director. And then when he became chair of the Committee on Education, I served as the committee director for 2 years before leaving for my current work. I am running to get back to work, serving my community. I'm wanting to work on increasing access to healthcare, in particular maternal care in our city, improving and stabilizing our childcare market, pushing for equitable growth and affordable housing. And when I'm talking about deeply affordable housing, but also preserving the affordable units that we already have. And then finally moving from an over-reliance on law enforcement to handle our public safety challenges in this city. So I look forward to the conversation, and thanks again for having me.
Perfect timing.
Yes. Thank you all for answering that. Next, we're going to move into section 2, which will start specific questions. But first, we want to have a testimonial produced by the Brookland Manor Coalition. And I want to call up Ms. Cheryl Brunson to kind of highlight what's going on there. Cheryl? You got to unmute.
There
There
you
you
go.
go.
Can y'all hear me now?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you.
All right, great. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cheryl Brunson. I'm the treasurer with the Brookland Manor Tenant Association. And we have been going through this redevelopment, like, Miss Elliott and I, we've been talking about it for years, about this redevelopment that's been going on here at Brookland Manor. But what's happening here is they're taking away some of our 3, 4, and 5 bedroom apartments. And we're fighting for our 535. Right now, there's 535 low income apartments, affordable apartments here at Brookland Manor. And the developer, MidCity, is trying to take that away from the residents here at Brookland Manor. They already tore down, the zoning commissioner gave them the okay to tear down Block 7. Block 7 was one of the places where they had all the part of the property where they had all the 3 and the 4 bedroom apartments. There's a lot of people at Brookland Manor that's being displaced. And, we're fighting for our property. I'm done.
Thank you, Ms. Cheryl. So this section will entail family questions around family displacement. And at the end of each question, I will ask each candidate to speak in random order. And so I want to call up Miss Minnie Elliott.
Miss Elliott, you have to unmute.
You got to unmute, Miss Elliott.
Remember, she got
The
her granddaughter.
microphone should be down at the bottom of your screen to the left. Like the screen where everybody is, it should be down to the corner of the left, in the left-hand corner of the screen, like above your start button.
There we go. There we go.
Well, I'm new to this. This is what you all model.
It's all right.
No problem.
It's all right.
It's all right.
Okay, my question to them is the family displacement. 40,000 families are on the DCHA voucher wait list for housing, which has been closed since 2013. The mayor has built 5 new short-term family shelters to replace DC General. That has a combination capability for 226 families. This is roughly the number of families that have been or will be displaced by the redevelopment plan at Brookland Manor, which the district is funding with $47 million in taxpayer dollars. Are there any circumstances where you support this destruction of affordable housing? What will you do to end the displacement of family? What will you do to help stop Brookland Manor, especially once you are or will be in office?
And we'll allow Jeanné Lewis to go first.
I had a feeling you were going to call on me. Thank you, Ms. Elliott, for that question. It's very layered. There are a lot of people a lot of lives and a lot of families that are going to be displaced in what you talked about. So one piece that we've been talking about in a lot of these forums is looking at our emergency rental assistance program. And right now the program is underfunded and there are restrictions that prohibit people from taking full advantage of it. So one is that I would allow people to apply for that emergency rental assistance more than every 12 months. I also would look at including a provision for small landlords so that folks who are living in housing owned by small landlords are not detrimentally impacting that, but folks who are living in housing with large landlords could get the assistance that they need. I also think that we need to invest deeply in repairing our public housing infrastructure so that families who are eligible for that have somewhere to go. The DC Housing Authority is intentionally allowing that to fall into disrepair so that it is no longer an asset for us. And in terms of Brookland Manor specifically, I think that what's happening is criminal. What the landlord is doing there and terrorizing residents is criminal. And so I would use my authority on the council to push the district attorney, the attorney general, I'm sorry, to use the full capabilities that he has to prevent that from happening. But we have to create competition and incentives and alternatives from private developers in order to really curb the terror that's happening to residents like at Brookland Manor.
Thank you, Jeanné. How about we go with Chandler J. Rahman next?
Thank you very much. When DC General was torn down, there's multiple parcels on Reservation 13. Parcel 1 has taken 10 years to even get going. And you know what happened? It was a sweetheart deal where the developer got the land for cheap. And he said, I'm going to build 2 buildings and there'll be mixed use development with, out of the 345, there'll be almost 100 affordable units. We said, great. Well, what happened was that, halfway along the way, the developer shifted it to 1 building and then went back to the city and said, to the mayor and said, hey, can you pay us $60 million to make it all affordable? We'll add 10 more affordable units, but you pay for the entire building. What the council forgot over those years was that they had already gotten a sweetheart deal. This is the kind of thing that happens every day, and we need to stop that. And in terms of Brookland Manor, I think we need to keep families together. I mean, that's what happens in those kind of residences where people end up developing relationships, friendships that last for a lifetime. And we need to keep those extended families together and repair those, because if they're comfortable there, and we need to make sure those are fixed. And I think that the DC Housing Authority and the agencies are literally just checking the box or ignoring residents when they file complaints, when they ask for help. And it's oftentimes for council members, it's too much. They're thinking big issues. Well, what I've always done in my life as my ANC commissioner, I focus on you, focus on your problems. Let's get you solved. And along the way of helping you get that problem solved, I will learn where the problems are and I can help address those legislatively. I think that's the way we need to look at it. Customer centered, customer first, get you the results you want, and that will lead to the right policy that needs to be put in place.
Thank you. How about Ms. Christina Henderson next?
Yes, thank you for that question, Ms. Elliott. I feel like we've talked a lot in this campaign around displacement and how to prevent that, given the experiences of not just what's happening with Brookland Manor, but the redevelopment of several other public housing places that are currently being discussed right now. One of the things that I want to focus on as a council member, like I said at the beginning, is preservation. How do we preserve the affordable units that we already have? And in those cases where we do engage with a developer or someone to develop new affordable housing, I'm pushing for equity. And what that means for me is being very targeted and intentional with how we spend our investments, but also what we do with our policies. Ensuring that we have a build first policy, ensuring that it's 1-for-1 replacement, not just in the unit number, but also in the unit size, because I feel like that oftentimes get lost. If all of my affordable units are studios and 1-bedrooms, that is no good for me. That is no good for our city, especially for many of our residents who have multi-generational families. And I think this is one of the key issues and a salient point that I feel like continues to get lost as it relates to Brookland Manor in terms of the number of 4- and 5-bedroom units that was on the property that is not going to be replaced. And therefore you are displacing those families by default. And so I feel like as a council member, I want to raise my voice on these issues, not just with that, but also how, we give developers, as Chandler sort of said, sweetheart deals and investments, and then we allow them to sort of do whatever they want in terms of fulfilling their affordable housing commitments. Sometimes they don't even fulfill it on the site for which we provided the incentive. They'll say, oh, it's too expensive to do it here. Let me do it in Ward 7 or let me do it in Ward 8, which I feel like has been pushing inequitable distribution of our affordable housing across the city. And we need more council members who are going to push back on the executive around these plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Will?
Yeah, the issue is developer influence with the DC Council, and that's why, you know, affordable housing now is getting torn down and being replaced with luxury apartments, because these private developers are trying to maximize their profit. And that's what private developers do. They have a duty to their shareholders to maximize profit. That's why they're tearing down affordable housing and building luxury units. I'm a candidate that is proposing a specific plan to take developers out of the equation. I'm running on a social housing model. I mean, how social housing works is that the government actually looks at housing as an infrastructure project to build in order to fit the needs of the people that live in Washington, D.C. So the way it works, the government builds the housing. That housing is open to anyone paying 30% of their income in rent, paying no more than 30% of their income in rent. The people who make higher incomes, their rent subsidize the rents of people who make lower incomes. Because the profit motive has been eliminated, because there is no developer associated with the project, 100% of rents are able to use productively. So every dollar you pay is invested back into your building, back into your community to cover the operating cost of the building. At the end of the month, after all the operating costs have been covered for the building, that building has a surplus. The amount of rent everybody pays creates a surplus for the building. Before, that surplus would be a profit for a developer. Instead, in a social housing model, that surplus turns into a surplus for the building that actually pays off the construction loans for the building. So what I'm offering is a housing system that meets the needs of the many, that eliminates developer influence, and that creates truly affordable mixed income housing that actually pays for itself. And it's a proven model that works everywhere around the world. The only reason that it does not exist in the United States is because of the influence that developers have on this process.
Yeah.
Thank you all for that. So now we're going to move to our next question, which deals with impact on children and families. And I'm going to call up Miss Yvonne Johnson. You got to unmute.
You know how we old people are.
You ain't old, you just forgot.
Okay, Ms. Johnson, so look straight ahead at your screen and then down and to your
To the
left.
left. Yeah, down and to the left.
Yeah,
on the
look down
screen.
and to your left. There's gonna be a little microphone
Yeah.
that says mute, and then there's gonna be a little camera there that says start or stop video. It's gonna be right above. Okay, so she cut the camera off. She getting close.
These virtual things are crazy.
It's all right. See, this is the reason why.
There we go. There we go, Ms. Johnson.
This was the reason why we're trying to host computer classes at Park Morton.
No,
Yeah, we hear you. You ready for your
you didn't
question,
do
Ms.
it. I
Johnson?
did it on
There you
purpose.
go.
My daughter did it. My daughter did it on purpose. Excuse me, I did it on purpose. She didn't do that. I didn't do it. My daughter did it.
No problem.
Okay. Don't blame me. Nah.
Sorry about that. I take that back.
Now
My
can you hear me?
apologies.
As long as we get it right. You ready for your question?
Okay. Our homes, can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Our homes are continually under attack, and it takes a toll on all of us, but especially our children's mental health, and also physically. They're getting sick because of the conditions of the apartments. Our children are not able to play on the grass. We call it a gated community because there are large fences around, so the children can't play on the grass. An expert from Children's Hospital, a doctor, spoke at the zoning commission and asked them to listen to what he was telling them that would happen to our children if they would not stop doing harmful things to them. The zoning commission didn't listen to him at all. it was like it fell on deaf ears. What steps would you take to protect our children and others across DC who are living in unstable conditions? And also the school system is, oh gosh, our school system is so poorly run and our children are falling behind. We need help there also.
Yes.
Okay.
All
I'm
righty.
gonna answer.
So we'll let Christina go first.
Yes, Ms. Johnson, thank you so much for your question. This is one of the things that I worry about most deeply in terms of how not only the redevelopment and things like that have been impacting children, but how that on top of all the trauma and isolation that we've been facing from COVID-19 has sort of been compounded for our young people right now, right? Adding to that, the additional isolation, but as you mentioned, you know, the inability to even go outside and play in a safe environment during this time is really, really affecting our young people. And I don't think anyone is really talking about this in a serious way in our government. One of the things that I want to look at is around how we stop operating in silos, especially when it comes to housing, health, education. All of these things to me are connected. When I was a staffer at the council, I had data on the number of young people who had pediatric asthma in DC. I had data on where those young people lived and then also sort of their attendance information. But we were never able to make the connection, and I felt like that was lost time. And I feel like it's incumbent upon all parts of the government to be working on this issue together, but also to ensure that the environments are not just safe for young people, but safe for anyone who is still inhabiting a space where development is happening. So we need more enforcement mechanisms, but we also need the information to proactively be shared with residents in terms of who they should contact when something goes wrong. On the education side, there's so much to be done there. And I think we really need to start in terms of how we improve distance learning, how we improve the delivery of care and education that's happening right now in this moment, and start planning for the future in terms of what we do to help our young people with the large amount of learning loss that they have been experiencing over the past year. What are we doing to plan for summer? What are we doing to help LEAs? And also, how are we engaging community organizations who do after school programs so that they can provide some recreational outlets for young people in this time, but also how can we improve our telehealth? So for young people who need to talk to someone about what they're going through, they have the opportunity to do that, not just in a school building, but in the comforts of their own home. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. How about Will Merrifield next?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for people to understand that the thing that Ms. Johnson just brought up, every council member does know about, you know, the issues at Brookland Manor. And they know because, you know, I've been the attorney at Brookland Manor, so I've walked with tenants to every single council member and told them about these issues. The Washington Post has written stories about these issues. We've documented and published these issues. So what is needed is for elected leaders to call this for what it is and say that it is wrong for politicians to side with developers over families, to support the destruction of communities over families. And we need to elect political leaders that will call this for what it is and organize with and fight with residents. I do not believe that this problem of family homelessness will be solved by making deals in the back rooms of the Wilson building if I'm elected. I believe it will be solved by me forming coalitions with people on the outside, with affected tenant association communities, with public housing residents whose their residents are in desperate need of repair. So I think we have to form coalitions. I will do that from the dais. I will do that as an elected official and put real political pressure on the individuals that hold that office right now, my would-be fellow council members. We will put real pressure on them to do the right thing by telling the truth about what is going on, because they know exactly what's going on in public housing and at Brookland Manor.
Thank you, Will. Next, we'll have Jeanné Lewis.
So thank you, Ms. Johnson, for that question. And it truly is a comprehensive question, because when we think about the safety of our young people and of our children, we're also talking about the safety of their parents and grandparents and caretakers and all the people around them. So I think one of the major obstacles that we have is that we rely on community benefits agreements, and we put the burden of negotiating with very powerful developers on residents, knowing that residents do not have the same resources for legal representation. Although Mr. Merrifield is an excellent lawyer, I know that developers have many, many more resources to advocate for themselves and oftentimes run over residents. So we say, well, if the community didn't negotiate a good benefits agreement for itself, then it's the community's fault if they didn't get what they wanted out of this development. And I say that that is unethical and that is inequitable. So as a council member, one thing that I would look at is how do we create a process where a community has more of a say in negotiating with whoever is doing the development. And part of that means that the community has governance and authority in the development. One proposal that I'm pushing is for more community land trust and more cooperative housing. Because if we invest in cooperative housing and community land trust, by right, the community has governance authority in the decisions that are made about what goes there, how it operates, and the impacts of that. Regarding the school system, that is a much longer conversation. We have whole forums on the school system. But I think that schools can be used as community hubs, whether virtually or in person, so that other resources and services that families need can be centralized in and through the school. And together that will help increase safety. But ultimately, I think that young people deserve a voice in their own safety, like the Young Women's Initiative out of the Washington Area Women's Foundation, which I've been a part of. And they deserve a voice with their elders. And I would love to create more processes where young people and elders can talk together about their vision for their communities and what it means to keep it safe.
I'm gonna take MC's pleasure real quick. So I guess no one can hear our timekeeper indicating their time is up. So if you go over time, she's just gonna cut you out. Is that fair?
Yes.
I think she's having some audio issues. Okay.
Is it possible for that person to be on camera and just hold up a hand or something too, to let us know?
I can ask. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
I'll hold up a hand at 30 seconds remaining as well. Thanks for your buddy.
No problem. Chandler?
Thank you very much, Ms. Elliott. There's a common thread between both of those points that you made, the zoning commission or schools. It's a top-down approach. One is where you have people who make six-figure salaries who think that they know better than the people that are living here. And same with the zoning commission. They look at it as in a way that's arrogant. They think they know better than what we know but they don't. We live it every day. And so we need to flip that around completely, where the zoning commission needs to be impartial and should not be political appointees by the mayor with a specific purpose, but more of an arbiter, a mediator would be a better word for it. And that's the approach that you take. With respect to schools, over the past decade, we've got 70% of our students, and that's the best we've gotten, that are coming out of our high schools who are testing ready for college. What does that mean? 30% are testing ready for college, which means 70% are not. And you see the gun violence, that's happening now. The reason for that is when you have zero opportunities coming out of high school and you have no path forward, you're going to do some things because you're desperate. And I think that's where we need to change things. I'm really focused on bringing back vocational education, as I did at the Latin American Youth Center. We did a GED and job training program where they had got their GED, but then also got paid for their training. That kept them coming back.
All righty. Thank you. So also, those were some very good answers, and thank you to the Brookland Manor Coalition for that section. We're now going to move into section 3, which will focus on low-income housing, and I'm gonna allow our next speaker to the liberty of being able to fully introduce himself, because I only know the name everyone knows, but I'm going to call up Bo Luther, who's going to give his testimony about what's going on at Garfield Terrace Senior. Bo?
Yes. what's going on at Garfield Terrace? First and foremost, I don't know if nobody knows Tyrone Gard has been going around telling people anything that they want to hear. But the last meeting that we had with him, that we're discussing, it should be an issue that they be discussed everywhere. Build first. Just build first with low income, not minimum living, not medium living, not moderate living, low income. Low income is next to homelessness. We keep talking about let's build these moderate living, these affordable living. Affordable living goes up every day, all day. Look around us, it's all that's for. But what about low income? From when Marion back in the 70s started, I'm first and foremost, I'm a Washingtonian, been living here before I was born. I'm 56. My family been living here for at least 80 years. So I've been living here before I was born. My family got put out of Georgetown when they was gentrifying Georgetown and sent us over there to Clay Terrace. But what I'm saying is low income, build first. What about building first within public housing? If they want to tear it down, it's fine. Build first for low income, for people like myself and people that's homelessness, that could be homeless today or tomorrow. You can build, for instance, at Garfield Terrace, you can build another building right beside Garfield Terrace while Garfield Terrace is here, and you can replace every unit here. So we won't have to go through that fact that they tear down Brookland Manor or another spot that they took 4 or 5 bedrooms to replace it to what? Moderate living. No, we need low income because we are the same people that you all asked to vote for. You come to our neighborhoods to ask us to vote for you, vote for me. But all I keep hearing is moderate living, affordable living. Everybody skips over build first and low income. They building every day, but are they building? Can anybody tell me the last time they built a public housing that was affordable for us? People for us. I'm talking about building where as though I'm listening to you all, where we can build, where we can do it all on our own. Everything on our own, recycling, solar window panes, eco-green system. I'm talking about everything on our own where we don't have to even deal with or worry about housing or anybody else. We hire within ourselves. According to Stop the Violence, you do what? You hire the very people that lives in there you say that's causing the violence because they are traumatized. So we want to know why there isn't, and we need to fight for build first. I don't care what nobody say, affordable living, I don't care about that. I never lived in for affordable living. I lived in low income. So build it back like Burn did. Build it back. Build first. Build it first. If you can build a building right next to this building with nobody there, and we still sitting here right here, and then next a new building build up, then they say they don't want us around. You got to build there because we build this country. Low income, poverty people. Then why does everybody else want to act like it's moderate living and medium living or whatever else you want to call it? You build it every day. Who's building low income housing for us? The same people that fight for you all.
Amen.
We got seniors, we got veterans, we got disabled, all living in this building. Tyrone Gard, nobody from housing or nobody that's running for council person at large came up here and said, I want to test these seniors disabled for corona. Nobody done it, but everybody running. Nobody sit here and said, let's help the mental, let's help the seniors, let's help the disabled. Nobody, but everybody running on these principles. We are dying, literally. Now, how is anybody going to really, literally help us to help this youngins get this together. Nobody's talking about that. I hear everybody keep talking. I ain't heard nobody say nothing about low income. I ain't heard nobody say nothing about Bill First or helping those people. They moving people in and out of these properties right now today. Nobody tested nobody for corona.
Amen.
That's so true. That is true.
But everybody want to run. But ain't nobody running to us.
Not a soul.
No, I get Mayweather, everybody, nobody running to these places where they need, seniors need it. Seniors are dying. They in the hospital, disabled. Why you think people on the street homeless? They ain't homeless because they want to be homeless. They got put out and left out. Who's helping the people that they put right back under the bridge from 1133? Right around from housing. They right back under the bridge. Who's helping us? But everybody want to run. And I'm tired of it. And I'm only 56 years old. I got to make it to these seniors' age. And I'm helping seniors. Now, who's really helping us? You can run on any principle you want to run on, but who's helping us now? That's it.
I think there were some questions in there on building first. I think it would be, are you willing to help us fight for a build first requirement for all development? How will you enforce build first rights when developers try to violate them? Let's let Jeanné start first.
So, Mr. Luther, I think I heard you say earlier that your last name is different, but this is the name that I see, so I'm gonna call you Mr. Luther, Mr. Bo Luther. I appreciate your honesty, and I appreciate your passion. And I do want to share that, I can't speak for my fellow candidates, but I suspect this is true for some of them. During the COVID-19 crisis, I have been doing what I can to help seniors. I have not been to Garfield Terrace, but I have been to Triangle View, and you can talk to tenant leaders over there and you can hear what they're doing. And I've also been helping out with mutual aid and going to the nooks and crannies. And I know some folks, you actually probably know Lydia Curtis. We go to church together, and I know she does a lot with your community as well. So, I think that there are several of us who are running, who are doing our parts, but we're not in all the places, and we're not in some of the places that are most needed. And so I hear you, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you holding us accountable for that. I think specifically around Build First, you are absolutely right. And in my earlier comment, I was talking about repairing public housing. When COVID first hit, one of the things that I proposed is that we stop new development in the city and we use that construction resource, that construction labor force, to actually repair our public housing as quickly as we could. And I think to your point, there are many public housing developments where some of those buildings are vacant right now, and we could repair them so that people have a place to move into. And I'm deeply committed to that. I think that we would need to have the political will and council members like myself who are willing to put the resources and the money there, because we're not going to find developers to do it. And too often we rely on those folks to do it. So I know my time is coming up. I'll pause there, but I just want to say I appreciate you for holding us accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanné. Christina?
Yeah, I want to echo what Jeanné said there. Definitely have been trying to do my part, but I feel like we haven't been able to get around to all of the various places. And I think this is the type of accountability and spirit that's going to be necessary going forward to ensure that no one is left behind. And that, again, we are serving the most vulnerable of our populations, but ensuring that all residents are benefiting. So when I talked earlier about preserving public housing, one of the things I feel is incredibly important there is build first. We build first when we do school modernizations. I don't understand why we can't build first when we are developing housing. And so before COVID, I was advocating for any surplus dollars that we had available in the district to go directly towards making the critical public housing repair needed. Because if we lose those units, we're going to be even further behind. In another forum, I called attention to this Washington Post article that I came across where the headline was "Unfulfilled Promises Plague DC Public Housing." Okay, this was an article from October 1986. So we have still been dealing with these same issues. And I feel like we need people to just be honest about the situation in terms of we can build it first, but we also need to ensure that every T is dotted excuse me, every I is dotted and every T is crossed when it comes to public housing, because it always seems like our low income housing projects and our affordable housing projects are the one that gets caught up in legal battles, but luxury developments do not. So that's more oversight that's necessary there, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Will?
Yeah, I feel your frustration, Mr. Luther, and I'm telling you, it is so simple, build first. And I'm gonna sound like a broken record. The reason build first doesn't happen is because the game is rigged. It's because the public housing that comes up for demolition because it is valuable land, and the mayor has the housing authority in her pocket. So that is why repairs aren't made, and that is why public housing does not get fixed, because they are trying to cynically use the fact that it's crumbling around its residents in order to justify demolishing it and privatizing it. So what we have to do is what my colleagues or my fellow candidates said: we have to build political will. We have to elect people that are willing to tell the truth about why this process is happening and why something as simple as build first does not happen. We went with Brookland Manor. We've been fighting for 6 years to prevent Brookland Manor from being torn down. In that 6-year fight, every single council member and the mayor gave that developer $46 million to demolish, in the midst of an affordable housing crisis, 535 units of deeply affordable housing. The game is rigged. So we need to elect people that will tell the truth about that, build coalitions on the outside to change it.
Thank you. Chandler?
Thank you very much. I want to go back to your COVID question because I'm in the field. When you look at it, over 90% of the people who are dying are over the age of 50. 94%. It's astronomical. And it took the mayor almost 2.5 to 3 months to get a testing center out in Ward 8. Well, you know what? We're doing that whole time. These health vans that we pay for, that we've already paid for, we're sitting idle in parking lots. Why not take it to the people? You could drive that thing into neighborhoods and say, hey, we're going to be here. Come on out. Or we'll come to your door. Let's make it as easy as that. But we didn't do that. And we're still not doing that. I don't get it. If testing is the most important thing, why do we not have these vans going out doing testing? It is so possible. It's there. It's a low-hanging fruit. All we just need to do is do it. And it seems like sometimes they miss the most common sense things that are available to us, and they try and look for these broad, lofty goals. In terms of low-income housing, we've got Potomac Gardens and Hopkins in my ANC, and we've been pushing for the city to move forward with the Build First model that puts new housing, brand new housing by the river where it's premium land, but let's make it affordable, 1-to-1. And I think what Christina said is right on, not just number, but the size. So I think we.
Thank you very much.
And I'm glad Chandler said something about low-income housing, because I think this next question is very important. It's becoming impossible for low-income peoples who live in DC. A person working full-time for minimum wage in DC without a single day off makes $31,200 a year. A senior on Social Security averages $18,000 a year. A market rate 2-bedroom unit costs $38,000 a year. However, inclusionary zoning, IZ, requires just 8 to 10% of new housing development to be affordable for households making between 50 and 80% of AMI, or area median income, meaning $63,000 to $100,000 for a family of 4. Do you consider housing for families with income of $100,000 to be affordable? What will you do to provide universal housing for low-income people? And I think we can start with Chandler on this.
Okay. One problem with the AMI is that we use a regional AMI. which artificially inflates how wealthy people are. And we should use a more localized average median income in terms of calculating who gets the affordable units or the low-income units. And frankly, I think people in DC should get dibs. You know, in my area, there's a whole Hines development where they built, use the trust fund to build affordable housing in right by Eastern Market. Well, you know what was crazy about that is that when they filled it, they took applications from all across the country. They didn't give a preference to the district residents who've been waiting for 7, 8, 10 years for housing, the preference to have, first thing. They took, individuals from outside of the area. And you know what? We're paying for it. We've been paying for it for years. We should get a preference first, and you should be at the first of the line, front of the line, and not thrown into a batch and drawn out of a hat. And I think that's the wrong approach. So I think we need to look at AMI and how that affects it, because a lot more people would be covered if we use a local AMI.
Thank you. Jeanné?
I agree that one sort of short-term intervention we can create is to revise our own calculation of the median family income. We do have our messed up convoluted relationship with the federal government. And so when we're talking with HUD, it imposes itself on our definition. But I think when we're talking about using city dollars to incentivize development, we can create our own definitions, and we have not been bold enough to do that. I also think that we can look at, and again, I mentioned community land trusts, because there's one right now in DC, the Douglas Land Trust, hasn't received support from the city, but historically the city has supported cooperative development and could support the development of community land trusts, allowing residents and communities to make their own definitions and own standards for what that development looks like. But again, I don't think that we're going to find a private developer whose interest is primarily profit to create the vision that we set for ourselves in having deeply affordable housing. And so it's going to require the city to leverage our own money and our own funds to do that. But I also wanted to say that I think we need to fund some of the proposals that we know will work that are already on the books. So the Way Home campaign had a proposal for permanent supportive housing. The council chose not to fund it in its entirety. So there are units of permanent supportive housing out there. We already know what it looks like and what it could do. That, again, we just need the political will to put the money there. Repairing our public housing also creates units. So some of these other solutions can create deeply affordable housing for folks who are at the lowest end of the income scale.
Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. Christina?
Yeah, I agree with both Chander and Jeanné. One of the programs that I want to retool is how we do inclusionary zoning, and part of that is retooling how we do calculate AMI. I think including Fairfax County and Montgomery County in our calculation just doesn't make much sense when we know that those areas are much more wealthier than the district. Another thing that I think is an interesting and innovative opportunity for DC is how we might use vacant commercial properties. So we know with COVID-19, we know a lot of businesses may choose not to renew their lease, especially downtown and other places. And where you have areas and buildings that are vacant, but also can be zoned as both commercial or residential, how can we transform those into deeply affordable low-income units? Whereas you have a commercial real estate person who has a vacancy and a need for rent, and we have residents in the district as well as homeless folks who also need to, they need a place to live. And so I feel like it's an opportunity for a mutual beneficial conversation. On that note, I just want to take the opportunity to say, unfortunately, this has to be my last question because I do have to run to another event, but I want to thank you guys so much for the opportunity to participate and be in conversation with you all. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We appreciate having you coming, and we enjoyed you.
Thank you so much.
It looks like Reggie has temporarily dropped. So in the time while he's logging back on, we can go over to Will.
So, I mean, programs like inclusionary zoning aren't going to get the job done. The crisis is far expanded. Solutions like that. I absolutely agree with Jeanné that community land trusts should be a part of this conversation. I'm running, like I said, on a social housing model that ties the amount of rent you pay to your income. So nobody pays more than 30% of their income for rent. So by tying rent to income, we don't have to worry about AMI. Like I said, that model is based on a model in Vienna, Austria, where they've actually created a human right to housing, and they have about 400,000 units of housing deeply affordable outside the private market. DC has about 8,000. So I want to get that number up to the appropriate number needed in order to solve the crisis. In order to do that, like I said earlier, the district is going to have to look at housing as an infrastructure project. The district is going to have to build housing that fits the needs of the people. The district can put people to work doing that. Just like Mr. Luther said, people want to work. All right, we're going to put you to work. We're going to train you up. You are going to build the housing that gets us out of this affordable housing crisis. We build infrastructure and housing, and we do it in a way that it pays for itself. That's what my social housing model does. But it's part of the issue. Expand rent control, preserve the affordability that's here now, social housing.
Thank you. And I want to thank Bo Luther for that section. This is a very important, conversation, because the policies we're talking about tonight, they, have an effect, and they have communities that there will be an effect. So we're going to transition into the next section, and I'm going to introduce Jeanné Lewis, who's going to give us a testimonial about the fight at Park Morton. And then she has 2 questions as well. This section will also focus in on community safety.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ms. Jeanné. You can call me Sean. Hi, I'm the president of the council at Park Morton, and we're in the middle of a gentrification fight. And please excuse me, I have my speech over here. DCHA is trying to clear our property right now as we're speaking, so that they can redevelop on our property with a private developer, Dante's Partners, and the community builders, also known as TCB. We're fighting for the right to be housed nearby in our community so that our community can stay together. But unfortunately, Bruce Monroe did not pan out, and our community is currently being displaced and dispersed all over the city. And we went from having 147 families to down less than under 60 now. So we're also fighting for paths to home ownership for our public housing residents, which is outlined in my Park Morton Equity Plan, also known as the PMEP. So I just want to touch bases real quick on the retaliation, the bullying that we sustained from DC Housing Authority. I meant to get this out before it was my turn, but I have received 5 cure and vacate notices in 2 years, being resident council president and fighting for my residents. In this fight, and I may get a little emotional, so y'all gonna hear my voice quiver a little bit, okay? That's me fighting back the tears, because I'm a strong person, and I have to fight for what's right. But they've done this to me, and they've done it to many of my other residents, and some of them have buckled under the pressure. They've gone and taken the voucher and say, okay, I'm just going. They didn't have the will to fight like I have, but I've sought out lawyers and had them to fight those illegal evictions and get them thrown out. But this is one of their tactics. Another one of their tactics lately has been issuing 30-day and 90-day vacates to people whose buildings are not in the construction zone. Okay, they're trying, and then they give them 2 options on that vacate notice and say, go here or there. And then at these meetings, they're telling everybody, oh, well, residents are volunteering to move. We're not forcing them to leave. Well, how is that voluntary when you say you have 90 days up until December 30th, and you can go here or there? or you can be homeless. So residents who don't contact me and don't know their rights, the first thing they're going to do is choose option A or choose option B, and they're going to go. I have on recording, by permission, one of my senior residents who was blind in one eye and partially blind in the other. DC Housing Authority has completely taken advantage of this woman and moved her to an unsafe environment, not fit for her visual disability. She was supposed to have an ADA UFAS apartment, and she does not have that. They did not give her the services that she was supposed to have, that she was required to have. They took advantage of her, and they've done that to several of my residents on this property. And even though I could walk through my apartment and show you a couple of little things in my apartment that you know, the floors are breaking up a little bit, you know, decay here and there. I still have a solid, strong apartment that has survived the earthquake, that has survived many hurricanes in the 19 years I've been living here. This place could be easily, you know, rehab long enough for this redevelopment to happen and allow my residents to be able to purchase a home in their communities. I've been pushing for equity, pushing for LECs, and DCHA and the developers don't want that. So they have been targeting me perpetually, targeting my residents and pushing them out. There are only 2 families left in 617, 3 families left in 611, and it's just all over the property sparingly like that. I've tried creating programs at my property to help my residents build their credit to get ready for these moves, because some of these places are looking at credit in order for you to take your voucher there. But they're being discriminated against because of their credit, not because of the voucher, because that's illegal. Now, I've tried to do senior computer training programming here. I've tried to do I've done home ownership workshops. They've bounced programs off of that and so much more. And my families now are currently being broken up, thrown anywhere, just treated any kind of way. And I have that in writing. I have voice recordings. We need council people that's going to adhere to the integrity that you all say that you have and serve the people. So with that being said, my two questions are, one moment, 1 second. With the home ownership and program, Park Morton is a do-it-yourself, self-help entrepreneurship community. And contrary to DCHA stereotype about Park Morton and other public housing residents, like my brother in arms, Mr. Bo Luther, our seniors working on things, we want to achieve permanent stability. We've drafted the Park Morton Equity Plan, which will help make home ownership a possibility for residents in the now and in the future. How will you assist low-income families, DC residents, in exercising their TOPA rights and securing permanent housing and home ownership opportunities?
And I believe we've been joined by Miss Monica Palacio.
Hey, Miss Palacio.
I got it right. I'm not sure. Just to let you know, so the questions are 90 seconds. I got our timekeeper there. You can see her, Ms. Beth. And after 90 seconds, and this is for everybody, she's going to indicate it by raising her hand. You're at time, and she will cut you off after 90 seconds. And for this first question posed by Ms. High, we'll let Ms. Palacio go first.
Just so you know, I'll raise my hand at 30 seconds so you know that time is coming up.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I was late. I was coming from another Zoom event, but did everyone already introduce themselves? Just a quick question. Yes? Okay, great. So I'll just use.
And Ms. Palacio, real quick before you get started, when you finish, can you please put your contact information in the chat box for all the panelists and attendees, please?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem, Ms. High. So really quick, my name's Monica Palacio. I've been in the district 30 years. I have worked with residents across the city for 8 years. I worked inside the DC government, and 6 of those years as a director of the Office of Human Rights, which is the civil rights investigation agency for the district government. So I've worked with many, many communities. I love DC. I'm a civil rights lawyer. I'm a mom, and I'm an advocate. And to answer your question about TOPA rights, I think that is a very powerful way to help build ownership in our city. And I think that one important resource we need there is legal support, so that you can have attorneys to fight the developers and get you through the process. So we need to provide funding to legal services agencies and to help train residents to understand their TOPA rights and decide to exercise those rights and organize. And I've met some really amazing people recently who have been organizing around preventing evictions and helping families pay their rent. So I know that the voices of tenants can be very powerful. I know the struggle is incredible right now to protect your homes and the places where you live now. So, you know, as your council member, I would certainly fight to support to keep residents in their homes in the short term by paying rent and making sure that no one gets evicted, and we extend the moratorium on evictions, but in the long term by making sure there are legal services. Was that time?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay, so I'm very excited to be part of the forum tonight. I also think we need better enforcement. We need to fight to help families and protect them from discrimination, whether they have a disability, whether they're facing some challenge around paying bills, paying rent. I believe we need better enforcement across the district government. Thank you.
Thank you. Chandler?
I want to go back to your first point. You know, any developer that uses those kinds of tactics ought to be banned from being able to work on such projects, not just now. There ought to be a stiff penalty for doing that, either an outright ban for a certain number of years, or they ought to pay the penalty directly to the residents that they inflicted those pain to. You know, but in terms of TOPA itself, I think, like you said, too many of the neighbors don't know what their rights are, or, you know, trying to navigate through the legal mumbo jumbo, except for Will can do that. But, you know, I think they need advocates, and I think, I'm sorry, Monica too. But you know what I think that they need is someone they can call on, that they can trust, who can give them the right advice. And that shouldn't be out of their own pocket. That should be provided as a basic right in terms of negotiating. So you know you have somebody you can count on your side to be the mediator, to be the negotiator on your side, because the developer have the attorneys, they've got the money, they're all set to go. They've got a plan, and you need to have the same amount of rights and the same type of advocacy on the resident side in order to make it possible.
Thank you. Will?
Yeah, there's so much to say about this issue. The first thing I do, Ms. High, is sit down and meet with you and look over your plan, your equity plan, and meet with the tenants to, you know, learn from them what they want and work for a way to try to get that out of the deal. I will say that, you know, all these issues, TOPA, these are things that are on paper in Washington, D.C. that are very hard to enforce. I will give you an example. I've been the attorney for the Congress Heights Tenant Association. We've been in a blood fight for 6 years trying to be able to enforce our TOPA rights. In the process of doing that, we were able to partner with the Attorney General and kick out Sanford Capital, the biggest slumlord in Washington, D.C., which, by the way, was receiving, Rapid Rehousing was receiving government money. Families from shelter were being steered to that developer. The only reason people knew about Sanford Capital is because those tenants stood up and fought and wouldn't be displaced. But 6 years later, we're still in litigation trying to reverse an illegal sale that violated TOPA. So what I'm saying is that this is why I'm running for council, because I know how these processes work, how dirty they are. I want to be in government to be able to draft legislation to correct these issues, to provide proper enforcement, but also tell people how the system currently works.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeanné?
Ms. Hyde, thank you for your testimony. So everything that you're saying is something that our campaign has been very passionate about since the beginning. I recently had an article in the Washington Informer about what the city could do and what I would do as a councilwoman to invest more resources in helping residents enforce their TOPA rights, create cooperative housing, and also create community land trusts. So the thing is that we have a legacy of this. We don't have to start from scratch. In the 70s and 80s, Washington, D.C. invested city resources in helping residents create limited equity housing cooperatives. And so we could do the same thing again. Part of that is advocacy and legal support. Part of that is the education component that you're talking about. You as a tenant leader should not have to be the one bearing the burden to educate your fellow residents about what their rights are. The city should be educating people about their rights. And so I would love to work with you and with other tenant leaders around the city who have a vision for what it means to convert their housing into home ownership. Because I know as an African-American, a big part of our wealth is in our homes. And so if we don't create pathways for Black people to own their own housing, then we are curtailing the opportunity for Black people to build our own wealth. We just know this. So I'm deeply committed to investing city resources in educating people about rights, making sure that you have a legal representation, and then in the long term, no longer giving subsidies to developers who use these kinds of tactics. There's no reason for us to do that. We could instead incentivize nonprofit developers. We can incentivize developers who are based here in Washington, D.C., who are small business owners themselves. And we could be lifting up people who want to advance our collective vision for what it means for our community.
Thank you. Ms. Hyde, question 2. You gotta unmute. You gotta look down and to the left.
My bad. My daughter was keeping noise in there. I didn't want all of that on the thing. My bad. The second question is about community safety. And every community leader up here would tell you that the DC MPD and private police hired by the property owners do not keep us safe. Police forces continually turn a blind eye to the activities that put our communities at risk, but go out of their way to harass residents with infractions, threaten us, and on top of that, like I said before, bully us with evictions. Okay, family members are often barred from the property or harassed when they come to visit with us. And also, I have to add that the DCHA parking enforcement takes advantage of ticketing our family that comes in from out of town, even if it's just for a few hours. So we want to know, how is it, we want to know, we do not believe that increased criminalization of our communities is the answer, okay? What will you do to keep our communities safe from crime and from police harassment? And a secondary part of that question that I didn't get to add on there is, how will you add in, violence interrupters and mental health enforcers?
Will, we'll let you start first.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen firsthand how communities are policed when they're up for redevelopment, and they're policed to get people out, just like you're saying. At Brookland Manor, there was a private security force hired. in order not to keep the community safe, I would argue, but instead hired in order to put evictions on people. We've seen in the Breonna Taylor killing that those cops, were part of a unit that was formed through a gentrification plan to try to get residents out of that neighborhood. So this is a very real issue. Community policing, I believe, has to start with investment in people. So when I said earlier that the government gave $47 million to demolish Brookland Manor, every single one of our council people voted for that. What if we invested that $47 million into the families that currently live in Brookland Manor? And we sat every kid down when they got into the 8th grade and said, look, if you want a path to go to college, here's a path to go to UDC. This is how you get there. If you want to learn a trade, here's trades that you can learn. Here's how we will invest in you in your future and provide a pathway for people. I think violence interruption means providing a clear pathway for people and having community resources and community money actually serve the community instead of demonizing them in order to justify displacing them.
Thank you. Monica?
Thank you. So when I led the team at the Office of Human Rights, I talked about violence. Violence is a process, right? It's a continuum. If we don't invest in our schools so that all children are safe and can learn, that's an act of violence towards our community. If we don't help those children see that they have a future, that's an act of violence. If we're paying security guards, the rent-a-cops, as we know they're all called, to come in and profile and terrorize our children, that's an act of violence more vividly. So I want to make sure that we do not, we have a zero tolerance policy in the Metropolitan Police Department. If an officer is found to be acting disrespectfully and harassing DC residents, they're out. If they use lethal force against a DC resident, they're out. No more second chances. I do think we need some form of law enforcement, but we need much, much better response systems like violence interrupters, like community navigators to help young people, residents, and our families be in charge of the safety and the quality of their community.
Thank you. Chandler?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I convened the first ever citywide ANC conference during the COVID-19, actually to talk about policing. And the topic was, how do we reimagine policing? And it was two parts. The first part was, how is policing experienced in our various wards? And so we had commissioners from every ward in the city to talk about how it is similar and how is it different in each of the wards that we live in. And then we gathered that. And then the second part of it was, we brought together the Deputy Chief of Police, Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, 2 council members, NAACP, and the Guardian Angels together to talk about what policing could look like if we were the national leader in that effort. And one thing came out to be, a consensus came to be, is that we ask our officers to do too much. And that we put too much on them, because if it's not fire, if it's not ambulance, everything else goes to the police. And they're not prepared for it, they're not ready for it. So I think we need to make sure that we take those off our plate, look at what their core responsibilities are, and what's the budget that goes with that. Anything more than that should go to social services like violence interrupted programs and the red flag law, so that we can really address the root causes of violence.
Thank you. Jeanné?
So I'm so glad that you asked this question, Ms. High. In so many of these forums and the conversation right now in the city, it starts and stops with police. How are you going to, reinvent police, reimagine the police, change the police? But we know that our safety does not start and stop with the police. The problem is that we've invested so many resources in our police force, and we've not invested in other things. Our police budget is $571 million. In total, the violence interruption programs in the city, I think, are just over $2 million, somewhere around there. That's several agencies, several different programs. And so we have a lot of of room to give programs that we know work, that we've seen work in other parts of the country, the time and the money that they need to prevent violence in our community. We also know that in communities, especially around public housing, those communities have been divested for decades. There is very little economic development. There is poor transportation. There are literally like roads end in dead ends because it's literally a trap. And so we know that the design of these communities and the design of your neighborhood and your community has been designed to prevent people from having healthy lives. And so our campaign is talking about equitable development, empowering small business owners who are from DC to create that development, hiring local and doing that work. But we also need to police the police. So I would end qualified immunity for police officers who take a life. I would reduce the authority of police unions from preventing disciplinary action. And I would also deeply engage the community in that accountability.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, like I said, this is a conversation that we need to have amongst impacted community members. We're now going to transition it. We're now going to transition. We're now going to transition into our next section that centers around policies of the unhoused. And myself, I'm Reginald Black. A little about me is that, you know, I'm in many spaces advocating on behalf of the unhoused, and currently am appointed to the Interagency Council on Homelessness, and I'm a lived experience appointee. In that work, we have found that 86.4% of all homeless persons in the District of Columbia, per our point in time count for January 2020, are African American. Last year, between 2018 and 2019, we lost 117 persons who are unhoused, which represents a 119% increase in death among the unhoused. And the overrepresentation of African Americans is profusely among the unhoused, 86.4%. During the COVID-19 health emergency, we have seen clearings of encampments during the pandemics ranging from trash only to full clearings. And we have high rates of mortality amongst the homeless population. Also, to date, we have 340, close to 50 somewhere, homeless people or unhoused folks have contracted COVID-19, and we've lost over 20 people. This is unacceptable. We need to not only have stronger development policies, we not only need to have stronger community development policies. Not only do we need a specific focus on low income, and when we're talking about AMI, you know, we're talking from 0 to 30. Well, my population, they are 0. And there's nothing that anyone has said yet, but we haven't asked any questions on it yet. What are people going to do for the 0 bracket? We did have questions about IZ. That traditionally does not serve the unhoused. We've heard a little bit about permanent supportive housing. It is a great resource. We do need more. But, you know, there was a time in this city, there were over 70 cranes, you know, and we have yet to see a significant decrease in the demand for homeless services. During our update to what is Homeward DC, we call it Homeward DC 2.0. We looked at 10,295 persons needing some sort of emergency housing services in the form of shelter, transitional housing, ERAP, and other prevention services. So we want to have an intentional conversation about how do we serve the least among us and make sure that, you know, these policies lead to, you know, a better community. Yes, the hosts Brookland Manor Coalition, the Garfield Terrace Resident Senior Building, the Park Morton public housing complex. Yes, we're myself through the Interagency Council on Homelessness and being homeless, we all have different situations we experience, but the end result is what happened to me, being homeless, being displaced, and not having a place to go, being over policed and pushed out of a community that most of us were born in or are longtime residents of. And we want to make sure that we have an intentional conversation about how do we serve everyone better, because we are the impacted community and we want to know who are our council members going to serve. If elected, we want to know who will you serve. So now I have two questions based on that premise. And the first one, COVID-19 has hit the unhoused community in the hardest. In 2019, the Office of the Chief Financial Officer indicated that there were approximately 10,000 vacant units in the District of Columbia. Right now, the mayor's office is temporarily removing sick people to hotels and then returning them to congregate shelters. If elected, how would you ensure effective use of vacant spaces? And will you support community-driven solutions like the Vacant to Virus Reduction Plan produced by various members of the unhoused community, which calls for permanently housing residents in vacant units to save lives during COVID-19? I think I want Jeanné Lewis to answer first.
Thank you, Mr. Black. I was very excited when you all invited us to this forum to read the plan. And I do think that that's a viable option, especially if it's coming from community. I have had several people experiencing homelessness live in my house. And as you pointed out, they've been moved into homelessness for various reasons. And ultimately it comes down to the affordability or the lack of affordability of housing in DC. It's not that they weren't working. It's not that they're not, good people, but there were circumstances that basically pushed them out of the resources that are available. So I do think that all of what we've been talking about to create truly sustainable, affordable housing is important. But again, the permanent supportive housing solutions that were proposed by the Way Home campaign, we just need to fund that. It was $71 million to fully fund that and potentially end chronic homelessness in the city. Our budget is $8 billion. We just didn't fund it completely. And so those are the kinds of decisions those are the kind of calls that sometimes we just need to make. But especially in terms of a public health crisis, I would be open to any creative solutions, including the ones that you have proposed through your coalition.
Thank you. Will?
Yeah, I support the Vacant to Virus plan. I don't think that, again, many Washingtonians understand that a lot of these vacant units are in these complexes that the taxpayers actually funded and built for these developers. So they should be used to, solve the homelessness crisis. I mean, what we have to do is immediately give subsidies to individuals that are homeless that allow them to be permanently housed. It is that simple. We should not have homelessness in the wealthiest country in the world. So in the long term, we need to bring down housing costs. Once people are housed, then we can work on what do you need to get more income in your pocket? What do you need to get more money in your pocket? Job training programs, mental health services, but the key is to get people housed. And what I don't think people understand is that's cheaper. That's a better investment for a government to make, because it's more expensive for people to stay in homelessness than it is to get them housed, get them off the street, and get people healthy. So it's the moral thing to do, but it's also the most economically efficient thing to do.
Thank you. Monica?
Hi, yes, I support the Vacant to Virus program and plan as well. It's shocking to hear that there are 10,000 vacant units. I think we need an inventory of those units, why they're still vacant, and how they can be used to support the unhoused. I also understand that we have to provide wraparound services to help people stay on their feet. One of the biggest complaints around the rapid rehousing program, for example, is that it's not long enough. It's not enough time to help people pay their bills and stay in their home. So we need to think about, financial stability for individuals and families who have experienced homelessness and now need a chance to really get back on their feet. One important way to do that as well is to expand the number of months where people can get rental assistance, and think about how we prevent evictions right now so that we don't fall off a cliff and have more individuals and families unhoused in the next 6 to 12 months.
Thank you. Chandler?
Thanks a lot. I think we should use any vacant units that have used public funds to be built to be available for housing individuals. And that's a great short-term solution because if they're sitting empty, there's no reason. We've already paid for them to be built, as Will said. However, in the long run, I think we look at the congregate shelters that we have for those who don't have homes, and we treat people like children in bunk beds that are not safe, where there's mental health issues and there's bed bugs, and so that needs to end. What I'm proposing are micro units. It's been done in Japan, where you have micro units that provides them with dignity, privacy, and it's their own for the night. And you could even have on the ground level storage areas where they can keep their belongings if they won't fit in their room. And it has a bed and a sink for the night. And so that kind of housing that for the immediate short-term housing situation is a better option than the congregate shelters, which are not COVID safe and really don't perpetuate the contracting of viruses and the spreading of germs. And another point of it is to have more services directly within those buildings so that you're not just living there, but you're getting the services you need to transition out.
Thank you. We also, want to make sure that we put this, in its context in terms of what the landscape of, our city looks like. Renters are routinely denied housing for reasons they never get to know, by screening reports they never get to see. Low-income renters and homeless families are spending hundreds of dollars on repeated screening fees, ending up penniless to pay for a first month's rent or move-in deposit. What would you do to address the significant incidents of discrimination that low-income residents face in the District of Columbia? And to that, will you support the Fair Tenants Screening Amendment Act of 2019 and the Michael A. Stoops Anti-Discrimination Act of 2019? Monica, you can go first.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Reggie. And several years ago, I met with advocates around the Michael A. Black piece of legislation, and I fully support it. But at that time, because I was director of the agency that would enforce the statute against, that would prevent discrimination against someone experiencing homelessness, I wasn't able to advocate in that role, but I fully support. I think that we need much stronger protections for individuals who are vulnerable in this way. And I fully support the Fair Screening Amendment Act. I think that it wasn't strong enough, though, in the language when the law was first passed. And I think that we need to support renters and reduce or eliminate these application fees so that they don't have to, like you said, squander their precious resources, so that landlords can pull up either legal or illegal records about their credit history or any other information about them.
Thank you. Jeanné?
Yes, so I do support both pieces of legislation that you mentioned. And, I rented, when I came back to DC after going away to college and living away, I rented for 5 years. And then I was able to buy the house that I live in because I had help from my mother. And I know that it is much more costly to be a renter than it is to be a homeowner. The amount of money that I had to spend in order to find a place, secure a place, and year over year, it actually, I'm saving money actually as a homeowner, right? And so I think that we need to do what we can as a city to reverse that as much as possible, or at least make an even playing ground. And part of the discriminatory practices that we see is a big part of what costs renters so much. I think that, the tenant advocacy resources that we have in the city need to be beefed up. I've heard over and over from tenants in the DC Tenants Union and other tenants that I know that, the fight is so long and the wait is so long to even get the support that you need to advocate for yourself. And the city can directly solve that problem by creating more advocates and creating more staff people in the offices that are designed to protect tenants. And so I would be committed to do that as a council member.
Thank you. Will?
Yeah, I support the legislation. It needs to be stronger. It has to have more teeth and hold landlords more accountable, and people should be more easily monetarily compensated if they are discriminated against. But at the end of the day, what you just described, Reggie, is, this is what landlords do. And this is obviously part of systemic racism. Why are people being turned away? Because these people are building housing units, and for some reason, they don't want a person who they're discriminated against living in that building. What I'm trying to do through my social housing plan is fundamentally eliminate landlords to build housing for the collective. That may sound like a radical idea, but it's actually very, very common in many other parts of the world. It works. It provides a human right to housing. Our model is based on those models. And that's what I'm advocating for, so that we can bring housing costs down and we can put money in people's pockets to get jobs, building affordable housing. And if people are in this housing only paying 30% of their income in rent, they can save money and they can become homeowners. The place where our Vienna, Austria, one of the places that has social housing, one of the highest homeowner rates in the world, because everybody just pays 30% of their income in rent. They're able to save.
Thank you. Chandler?
Will's plan sounds great and all, but it assumes that the district government is capable of carrying this out. And I just don't, frankly, from this conversation we've had tonight, frankly, I don't trust them. I don't trust that they can pull this off. They've shown that they can. They can't even do basic things like treat housing for cockroaches or moles or for mice. How do we expect to do social housing? I just don't think that's possible. However, going back to your original question about discrimination, I completely agree. We need to empower the Office of the Attorney General to take a hard stance, as they've done, by going after those who are discriminating against tenants. I did a lot of that when I worked for a organization called Inclusion, which was advocating for people with disabilities and against discrimination of people with disabilities in housing, which is why I'm one of the big proponents of universal design in any new housing that's constructed, so that it fits both individuals without disabilities, but also is functional for people with disabilities and their families.
My name was brought up. Can I respond to that?
Come on.
We have several audience questions, and we want to, like I said, we want to focus in on impacted communities, because these are the people that you will ultimately serve. So we will ask these questions in random order. You still will have 90 seconds, and as we start to run out of time, we will then shift to just yes or no answers. Is that fair? All right. So the first question from the audience, the questioner asked, explain to me, how will you preserve public housing, especially with this transformation plan for the 14 properties? And did any of these DC council members ever been to a public housing community? I think we've answered that. So how will you preserve public housing, especially with the transformation plan for the 14 properties under DCHA? I believe we'll have Chandler start first.
You know, it all comes down to leadership. Frankly, I think the leadership over the years has squandered our tax dollars, and which is why we find ourselves with so many housing units that are not even meeting the basic human standards of dignity. And they should be held accountable. Frankly, if they need to be fired, they should be fired. And because, you know, and the other thing I think we need to do is something we've talked about. When I worked at Youth Build, we had our young people go in and fix units, and they got the training, they got paid for it, and so they were able to fix things. And then on top of that, they learned a skill and they helped somebody. And I think that's one of the ways we need to do it. Use these places as a way to train our young people with the skill and fix units at a more affordable rate. And in return, at the end of their training, they could become a resident or an owner of one of those buildings. So that you build that level where you go from trainee to resident within a building, and you're invested in that building.
Thank you. Will?
You got to interrupt the transformation plan if it's not working for the people. I mean, that's the power of being an elected official. When I think about Brookland Manor and I think about the zoning commission, which was a completely rigged process for the developer, the whole community showed up, testified in favor of preserving the affordability. The plan still got rubber stamped. If we had every single council member come down to the zoning commission and say, I stand in support of the Brookland Manor Tenants Association, and I do not approve this plan. I am in solidarity with the demands of Brookland Manor, then that plan wouldn't have went through. So we need to elect leaders who will stand up and fight for people and call things what they are. I mean, that's why we're running. We're running because I don't know why else you would run other than to try to fight for the needs of the people, the needs of the collective, and call things what they are.
Thank you. Jeanné?
So, you know, the truth is that, and we've talked about it tonight, there are a lot of forces at play, a lot of monetary forces, a lot of political interests that has created the tide that we see around our public housing infrastructure. And so, you know, the conversation we've had tonight, it sounds like we all agree on the importance of it, but ultimately we have to build power and flex power to stop that tide. You know, I am the only homeowner that I saw who was attending organizing meetings of the DC Tenants Union, the citywide DC Tenants Union. And when the union was trying to decide what issue was they were going to work on, public housing and preserving public housing is one of those issues. I know from being a community organizer, the power when people organize, but as an elected official, I would have the power to create opportunities for your voice to be heard. So instead of holding hearings, you know, between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. when people are at work and people can't get there and their children are in school, what if we continue the opportunity for people to testify and show up the way that we have during COVID, to record your testimony, to show up in person, even in the evening if you need to, and to show up on Zoom. This will help create the political will among council members who are resistant to the change that we're talking about, as well as council members who are already on board with you, so that we can then flex that political power, as Will said, to interrupt the current plan and make sure that our resources are not going to displacing families.
Thank you. Monica?
I think last I heard there's a waiting list of 71,000 people at DCHA. And that waiting list has just been growing and growing. And I want to understand what is going on with the leadership of the DC Housing Agency, because if we're talking about our, you know, low income and mid, you know, low to modest income housing in the city, DCHA controls that huge portfolio of housing. We need to invest in repairing it and sustaining it and making it safe and healthy for everyone to live there. And I quite honestly, over the 30 years that I've lived here, just think that DCHA is falling deeper and deeper into a sinkhole where it's not delivering on the housing that DC residents need. So I think as a council member, one of my priorities will be oversight and accountability and fighting to understand what is going on at DCHA.
Thank you. I'm gonna take MC's privilege because we got a little more time. I believe one of our hosts had an additional question for you. Bo, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, pose your question.
My question is this, right? When it comes to housing, we already basically have a resilient club up here, and nobody's paying that no mind. We do agriculture, we do carpentry, we do brick mason, we do landscape, we do everything up here that's consists of a resilient club. We have solar paneling on this roof up here. Everything that you could consist of is having a resilient club, a resilient hub. We have that in Garfield Terrace. So we really kind of like talking in circles when it comes to really doing something. We're really doing it up here every day. When we was on the Zoom meeting, I'm downstairs programming computers for seniors, but nobody's talking about really doing this stuff. We're really, if you look at anything I've been doing on Facebook, everything y'all are talking about, we're doing it right here with these seniors. And all we keep doing is saying what we could do. We're doing it. Mayweather, you know yourself, bro. You done seen us do stuff up here, Will. You know what we do up here. You know, we build and repair. We clean our hallways. We clean our laundry rooms. We are doing everything that consists of a resilient hub, but nobody's paying Garfield Terrace no mind. Why?
That's a great question.
I'm listening. Why? We're doing everything that y'all said that could possibly be done. We talked about TOPA. We brought up TOPA. Garfield Terrace Senior Citizens brought up TOPA. Nobody else brought it up before we brought it up. And then we got Aquarius Vance on the line asking questions so she can go back to Tyrone Gurr and Larry Williams and tell them all our information. What is wrong with us? Wow.
I like that question.
She's our enemy.
Timekeeper. Could we just so we can get to the other audience questions? Could we do 60 for this question?
Wow.
So they got to get to it in 60 seconds because I think Bo need direct answers right now with that.
Really, man?
Can you summarize the question for us?
Let's start, Jeanné. So he wants to know, how are you going to be, representative and be involved in an impacted community? Are you just going to be human, or are we putting people on pedestals here?
So 60 seconds for that. So I think I understand the question to be, acknowledgement of the self-determination that you're already demonstrating, right? And, one thing that I noticed when I moved back to DC is that the community gardens, the self-determination, all the work that people were doing for their communities was systematically banned, particularly Black folks. It was systematically banned by the city, and then new programs will be created to allow new folks coming into the city to do it. So we've had community gardens for years and years and years. Folks were told they couldn't plant tomatoes on the corner, but then, 10 years later, we have an incentive program to start community gardens or bring in farmers markets. I am deeply committed to tapping into the wisdom that is already in our community. One thing that I would like to bring, I've seen this model in Alaska, is a children and youth, or an elders and youth conference, where we have the wisdom of elders and longtime DC residents who do the kinds of things you're talking about, Mr. Luther, with young people who want to learn those skills so we can transfer that knowledge and help transform communities.
All righty, Will?
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, I have been up there, man. I've seen it. It is amazing. I wanted to, come watch football in the lounge because it was so comfortable. So what I'm saying is you need council members that will be elected, that will recognize your work, that will call out your work, and that will fight with you to protect what you got and what you're doing right now, instead of selling it off to the highest bidder. I mean, that's the bottom line, man. Like, you're right. You are doing it. You guys have an amazing program that you're running up there, but you need people, you need elected officials that recognize that and will fight beside you. And I got a track record of doing it. It's what I've done ever since I've been in DC.
Thank you. Chandler?
Yeah, the lack of recognition is fear. Fear that, they might actually see proof that citizens, when empowered, can do for themselves. And I've walked the walk since I was young. I've worked since I was 15 years old. I paid for my own college. I came here, took 2 jobs, worked at the Latin American Youth Center, advocated for people with disabilities. So I'm a doer. That's what I've always done. And what you're talking about is what needs to be replicated, not ignored and not hidden. It needs to be replicated in other areas because it really, truly does empower the people who live there and helps them raise themselves up so they know they can do for themselves. They can do for themselves and they can build what we've all been talking about. And I thank you for that.
Thank you. Monica?
Hi, yes, thank you, Mr. Luther, for making those incredible points and for all the work and the sweat equity that it sounds like you're putting into Garfield Terrace, into the apartments and the lives of the families there. So we need more leaders like you. We need to support you by finding funding to help when you need solar panels, when there have to be repairs, when you need those computers for the seniors. I believe that it's our responsibility to invest in the families that have been here the longest in DC and fought the hardest to stay here. So thank you.
Thank you. So back to some of our audience questions. The questioner asks, what is sustainable housing? And what do you think true affordable housing is? And how will this housing be launched if elected? First,
I'm sorry,
Chandler.
can I interrupt for just a second? I have to go to an 8 o'clock event, which is about to start in 1 minute. But I want to thank you all so much for the opportunity to have this discussion. And I'm grateful to you, Mr. Luther. I think you should run for ANC or something higher soon, because we need to replicate what you're doing. So thank you all so much. I'm grateful.
Thank you, Mr.
I am
Chandler.
running for ANC member, Ward 1, single member, District B03, bro.
All right. I'll look for you there.
Thank you, Mr. J. Rahman.
And this is Jeanné Lewis. I also have to step away at 8 o'clock, and I put it in the chat, but I appreciate the invitation and I really appreciate the conversation tonight. Please reach out to me, all of you, any of you. I'd love to talk with you directly and answer more questions if you have them.
Yeah, likewise, I put my number and email address in the chat also. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you
Thanks,
all
everybody.
very much. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
all
for
very
coming.
much.
Hi, I'll contact you.
All righty.
Thank you.
So we only
Thank
got 2 candidates left. I'm gonna let the timekeeper have her discretion as she decides on the rest of these because we got about 30 minutes. So again, the question was, what is sustainable housing? And what is true affordable housing? And how will this kind of housing be launched if you were elected? How about we'll start with Monica.
Thank you. I was just typing my contact information in the chat in case people start leaving. But I think that true affordable housing, I believe the point was made that we need to think about an AMI in the 0 to 30% range. Because I know that for many families, they've been disadvantaged historically. They haven't been able to build the wealth and build the credit history. And, 50, 60 years ago, women couldn't even have a credit card or a bank account. So we need to help head of households, families, and disadvantaged families have access to the loans and also spend less of their income in able to buy and own a home. I think that was like 60 seconds, right? Was that a warning? I'm not sure.
Sorry, that was a 30-second warning.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's hard to know which is which, but
Yeah, it's a little confusing.
so I will just add that, for many families, including immigrant families and Latinos, they only earn, less than half of the AMI required to buy a home. So we have to really invest in the families that work so hard every day and can't even begin to build the credit history and the resources to buy a home.
Thank you. Will?
Yeah, we have to do away with thinking about AMI and funding affordability based on AMI and tie your rent to the amount of income you're making. And if you're not making income, then you cannot pay rent. And if you cannot pay rent, you're subsidized in order to stay housed so you don't fall into homelessness. And so more problems, that avalanche that we've seen so many times when people do fall into homelessness, does not occur. I'm going to sound like a broken record. I have a plan to do that. It is called social housing, which builds housing as an infrastructure that ties your rent to the amount of money you make, and you only pay 30% of your income in rent. Again, it's very common all over the world. The only reason that it does not exist here, our president, Donald J. Trump, is a developer. Developer influence permeates throughout our political culture, and it permeates here locally as well. So we are subsidizing developers as opposed to building housing for the collective that meets the needs of everybody. Elect people who will change that.
Thank you. I like that you brought up housing, because this is a question the audience produced. ERAP and Catholic charities always run out of money quickly. So how can we extend rental payments? You can start, Will.
Well, I mean, we have to fund it. It runs out because the council doesn't prioritize the funding of ERAP appropriately, and people are constantly not being able to qualify for it in time, or they can't qualify for it because they've already got it once in a year and they fall into homelessness, which again becomes more expensive for the district to pay for. So we have to fund ERAP appropriately. Coming off this pandemic, we better have a plan to prevent, like Monica said, a wave of evictions happening after this pandemic. And that means we're going to have to fund ERAP. People are going to have to get it more than twice a year, because we're going to have a spike in unemployment and a spike in rents becoming due at the same time. And the district can make the front end investment to keep people stable, or it can make a mistake and try to do things back end after people fall into homelessness, which will be more expensive.
Thank you. Monica?
Again, I want to say that my platform and my campaign is about protecting families and saving lives. And I think the number one way that we do that right now is at whatever cost to pay rent and mortgages for families to stay in their homes. Yes, ERAP needs to be funded at an additional $10 million or $50 million, whatever it takes. We tap into that rainy day fund. We beg, borrow, and steal. We issue mini bonds so people can pay into the system. But we're going to have to use the system we're in to fix this disaster that is the economy right now. And it's going to punish poor people first.
All righty. So here's another question from the audience. How can tenant associations be brought to the table with every development deal? Let's start with you, Monica.
Well, first of all, I don't trust the development deals. I think that we need more, we need watchdogs on those development deals. While I love how dedicated Will is to the social housing model, I don't think that the monster of capitalism is going to allow for that. So we're going to need we're not just tenant associations, but watchdogs like Ms. High, like Mr. Black, like all of you, to understand what's really happening on the front lines. Because when people are locked away in the Wilson building, or, down, on K Street at the law firms, they don't really understand what's happening and how families are being treated and harassed to get kicked out of their homes. So we need a watchdog agency that is not beholden to anyone, who tracks and enforces everything these developers say they're going to do.
Will?
What was the question again, Reggie? The initial question?
How can tenant associations be brought to the table with every development deal?
I mean, the tenant associations, my experience with tenant associations being brought to the table is you have to fight, claw, scratch to get to the table, and you need a lawyer that is going to litigate on your behalf. It means filing lawsuits, and that is not the way it should be. That is a completely broken system. So what we have to do to get tenant associations to the table and have their voices actually heard is eliminate developer influence through our election process by banning corporate interests from being able to contribute to politicians. And I mean, if we don't do that, then we're never going to be able to get to a place where, that influence doesn't trump the influence of the associations, unfortunately. I mean, it's really hard to raise money. Running an election, I've experienced that firsthand when you're grassroots, not taking corporate donations. And it's a lot easier for a politician to just take a bunch of corporate money and drown out all the other voices in the race. So we have to undo that and get rid of that influence.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Another audience question. What are we doing for families that have children with disabilities? Monica?
Well, what I've heard from those families is first of all, that those children have been left off the radar completely, that parents have had to fight and battle the schools so that children with IEPs and children with special needs have access to the teachers and the support services that they need. But I think those children were an afterthought. When we decided to close schools and we decided to go online, I've heard over and over that parents are frustrated and angry that we're not doing enough. So I want to invest in more support services for every child, because I believe every child deserves that, but children with special needs go first.
Thank you. Will?
Yeah, I mean, we fund our school system in a very perverse way. So, we make children take these standardized tests, and then the schools that don't do as well as the standardized test actually get funding taking away from them instead of funding added to them to make sure the kids are being, diagnosed appropriately with disabilities that may prevent them from being able to learn at the level somebody else does without having that disability diagnosed. So we need to diagnose disabilities. We need to invest in traditionally disinvested schools, and we need to keep people housed, because there's nothing worse for a child. I've seen it firsthand, to go through the repeated traumas of evictions. We are housing homeless families experiencing homelessness on New York Avenue and those hotels without any ability to play in the grass, without any ability to go outside of a hotel room. So that is criminal, it's immoral, and I think we have to provide stable, affordable housing for families, especially families with children with disabilities.
Perfect, because this next question is about rapid rehousing. So rapid rehousing puts unhoused individuals in unaffordable apartments with a time limit subsidy, resulting in evictions when the subsidy ends. How will rapid rehousing look if you were elected, or how would it change? Will?
Rapid rehousing would end. We need people to have permanent subsidies, and those subsidies should be invested in a social housing model to help cover the operating costs of the building, instead of going to drive up rents by giving it to a private developer. So social, I mean, I worked at the legal clinic. I've talked to so many residents in the rapid rehousing project. It is a completely failed model. Market rent for a 2-bedroom apartment is $3,100 a month in DC. That's $38,000 a year. Someone making minimum wage makes $32,000 a year, $33,000 a year. So there's no way, once a minimum wage worker or a medium wage worker, once that subsidy ends, there's no way they can stay housed. It recycles people back into homelessness, and it subsidizes a subprime slumlord market. We're giving slumlords our taxpayer dollars to exit families through the rapid rehousing program. It's a travesty. It should be ended immediately.
Monica?
Hi, yes, I've heard over and over from housing advocates and very, very incredible people that the rapid rehousing program is a failure, and it's like a fast track to put people back into housing instability. So I agree with Will on this one. We have to, kill that model and start with something new where we can actually help families with a permanent housing subsidy, and so they can get into affordable units and get into units where they'll be able to stay long term. Otherwise, we're just making promises we can't keep and letting people fall off that cliff into being unhoused again.
Thank you. So I think the next two questions really are related. So I'm gonna kind of ask them both as one. And if my timekeeper isn't agreeable with it, we'll give you 1 minute to answer this just because it's so long. So far, people hear candidates explaining why they should vote for them. But could you describe a little bit more of what you have done and how it tells a different story? And in addition to that, how can the community hold you if you become an elected official accountable for anything that has been told about developments or promises that have been made to the community?
Reggie, I'm gonna do 90 seconds because I was doing a minute. Maybe I missed the.
Okay, we can do 90.
All right, sorry.
We can do 90. We can start with. Yeah, we can do 90. So I'll repeat the question. So far, the audience has been hearing why should people vote for you, but we would like to see a deeper look of what you have done and how does it tell a different story. And in addition to that, how can the community hold you if you become an elected official accountable to what they have been told about developments and the promises you have made to the community? And we can start with, I guess, Monica. She looked ready.
I was waiting. So thank you for that question. I'm very excited to say that when I worked in my office at the Office of Human Rights, I knocked down a wall and put up glass, okay, so that everyone could see what I was doing all day long, and they knew they could walk into my office anytime I was there and find me. So I'm all about being accountable, transparent, and available. Number two, I started my work in this city, working with incarcerated parents, driving their partners and children to the prison system in Lorton to help rebuild those family connections. I have done everything I know how to do to be of service, to be a public servant. And every case that came to my agency, every possibility to help someone, even if people were like, well, it's just one person, it's just one thing, let it go. I'm like, it's not a small thing for that person and that family. So we need to have high standards and serve every resident, whether they need food stamps, whether they need, their trash picked up, whether they, are facing COVID-19 and lost their job. We have to fight for every resident in this city.
Thank you. Will?
Yeah, I mean, I've started my career defending people against, medical debt that they were burdened with. I defended people in courtrooms against evictions. I came to DC. I've represented tenant associations all across DC. I've tried to do so with integrity. I've tried to be in complete solidarity with people and actually get underneath and solve the problems that they're facing. You can hold me accountable because you all know me. I mean, I have been in the community while I've been in DC on the front lines fighting against displacement. So I expect to be held accountable through that process. And you can trust me because one, I've been in the community, and two, I'm running on a platform that is taking away the influence of corporate money and developers on the housing policy process. So yeah, I mean, I look forward to continuing working with people. If elected, if not elected, I'm still going to be working with people the same way because that's what I believe in and that's what I do.
Thank you. We still have a few more minutes. So, and I got only one question I think would be great to end it on. So if any of the panelists want to ask any questions, we have about 15 minutes. So we want to save just maybe 5 or so at the end. So if any, panelists have any burning questions, please ask them.
Well, I actually just typed one in the chat that I would love to hear an answer to. How will you help seniors, people with disabilities, and veterans with policies that will eliminate credit checks and erase debt due to no fault of their own? And I put an example down there, like it was a resident here at Park Morton whose husband passed away, and their car that he was making payments on got repossessed, thus leaving that debt on her credit. Okay, so now, because that debt is on her credit, she has to, one, clean that up before she can even get her voucher to move off of this property. You see what I'm saying? And that's going to also hurt her when she get ready to move, because a lot of these places are what? Looking at your credit. So how are you going to combat this? Because there are seniors, I just heard Will say that he has fought for people with medical, you know, bills and stuff, because that happens too. You know, husbands and wives die and leave their families with medical debt, repossession debt, et cetera, et cetera. How are you going to keep the seniors from, you know, being displaced because of credit situations, because redevelopment displaces families? And timekeeper and Reggie?
Yeah, maybe Will can go first.
Yeah, you know, unfortunately, a large part of that is a legal issue. I mean, you need to get lawyers to be able to clean up credit with those issues, to challenge things that are on people's credit that aren't there properly. And it's a lot easier when you have a lawyer to do that. So I think we should fund, you know, legal services to be able to allow people to operate in the economy, because that is an issue that I don't think a lot of people understand, how difficult it is to operate in the economy when you have poor credit, when you have poor rental history, when you don't have a bank account. It's almost impossible to do things on the day-to-day that you need in order to be, you know, self-sufficient. So, and, you know, lastly, I will say, I remember when I first got to DC, going into the homeless shelters and just being shocked because they looked like old folks' homes. There were so many senior citizens that were in homeless shelters because they're on fixed incomes, they can't pay rent. So again, we have to reduce rental costs, put money in people's pockets, and make sure that they have jobs, they have more money, and their cost of living's lower.
Monica?
Thank you. So I agree that, you know, we need more services, because laws that protect people from inheriting debt from someone, and someone, you know, having lost somebody they loved, that situation is a horrible situation. I've heard of many people who end up divorcing someone they love just to protect themselves from the you know, the predatory credit sharks coming after them. So I want to make sure that we can give people legal protection for that to happen. And I want to make sure that we fund trusted legal services agencies like Bread for the City, like Neighborhood Legal Services and Legal Aid Society, to help people fight against those horrible reports and people blaming them and coming after them for the credit.
Thank you. So we have about 9 minutes or so left. So the final question from the audience is, how come the people who run don't work with other people when only one of you are chosen, but you have the same platform? So what is the difference in each of your platforms, and why should that be important to the voters? We can start with Will.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that my platform is, I believe, completely unique in the sense that I am running on and popularizing a proven model around the world, a social housing model. I don't believe that people understand how insane, how radical our current housing policy is. We give away all our taxpayer dollars and all our public land to developers and tell them, build luxury apartments in order to solve the affordable housing crisis. That is literally what we do. It is a radical policy that does not work. It's not meant to work. It's meant to enrich politically connected developers. So my plan eliminates that process, creates affordable rents for people, also creates affordable ground floor retail for small businesses to pay a fraction of the rent that they would be paying at these ground floor of these luxury units. So it's a way to protect small businesses. It's a way to allow people to have more money in their pockets because they're not rent burdened. That money gets recycled back into the local economy to help small businesses to jumpstart the economy. It's a much more rational approach, and it's different than any other candidate.
Thank you. Monica?
Thank you. While I believe in the good intentions of many of the candidates, and I know this is a housing forum, housing is a fundamental issue, but we have to look at many other issues as well. I'm not a single issue candidate. We have to look at public safety, why Black and brown people are dying at the hands of the police. We have to think about our schools and our children that are lost, parents that need to work and they're not safe because they don't have personal protective equipment. We have a lot of issues to fight. And I believe I'm the only candidate who brings 30 years of experience here in DC, 8.5 years working in the government. I'm a civil rights lawyer, I'm a mother, and I'm someone who's had to live as a single mom, head of household for many years. So I bring a unique perspective, and I'm the first Latina to run for DC Council in the history of our city, the first Hispanic woman. I think that says a lot about how we need to change representation on the DC Council. That's what's different about me.
Thank you. So we have just about 8 minutes left. So I want to thank Will Merrifield, Monica Palacio, Jeanné Lewis, Christina Henderson, and Chandler J. Rahman for coming and speaking with impacted community members.
Excuse me, Reggie, one second, please. Somebody named Robert Warren wanted to ask before they leave, can you ask about the DC Recovery Act and whether they are aware of it?
So if we can get an extra 5 minutes at the end, I definitely will do it.
I apologize. I didn't mean, as you were wrapping up, it just popped up there.
Yeah, I saw it too. I see it now too. Is that okay with my team there? The audience, there's an audience person. Okay, there's an audience question about what is the DC Recovery and Adjustment Act. So I think the question there would be, are you informed about the DC Adjustment and Recovery Act, and do you support it? Are you aware of this bill, and do you support its passage? Let's start with Monica.
Hi, I have to admit that I am not familiar with the bill exactly. I may have missed it, so I can't speak to it. I'd be happy to turn my time over to Will.
I believe the DC Recovery Act involves reparations, and I believe that a lot of the issues that the DC Recovery Act seeks to address are a lot of these issues that we talked about today. The ability to gain equity through home ownership, the ability to operate small businesses, to have capital injected into your small business. And I support all that. I mean, absolutely, that we have a history of systemic racism in the United States. And we see how systemic racism plays out right now in the District of Columbia. It is a hyper-segregated city with one of the highest rates of Black unemployment in the country, and a school system that does not work for all children. So absolutely, I support acts that seek to inject capital into human beings in order to address these things.
And I also agree, if that's what in fact it's about, I support it wholeheartedly.
And I hope that is what it is. I'm not, I believe that's what it is.
Well, I'm definitely gonna do some research now because I have never heard of it.
Can I ask one real quick question?
Go ahead, Buff.
Why do we pay housing rent and we get nothing done?
I'm happy to answer that question.
I know you are.
The reason that you pay housing rent, nothing gets done is, I believe, what I said earlier, it's the same thing why nothing got done at Congress Heights, the same reason why nothing gets done at Brookland Manor, because the government and private developers cynically use the falling down, the crumbling of infrastructure around its residents. They play on people being so frustrated by that they are willing to take any development deal that comes along. Those development deals ultimately displace people. So you're right. You pay rent. That rent should be used to make repairs to your building.
So what if we don't pay rent? What if every public housing just join together and say, forget all y'all, and don't pay no rent to nobody?
Yeah,
because for one, I'm gonna say this for one, because just like Sean Haas said, it's over 228 residents that supposed to be living in this building. It's probably less than 100 now, because they've been secretly moving them out, scaring them, intimidating them, gentrifying us, just scaring the seniors, making them want to move, making them do this. They making all the seniors try to move down there at Arthur Capers, and that building will be filled up because they don't realize it burnt down and the people that left going back. So you're going to sign your name off a public housing list and wait on a list for somebody to literally die in Arthur Capers, because that's the only way you're going to get in there when somebody move, when somebody die. And it's just simple as that. Because they don't see you at 62 years old gonna move out of Arthur Capers when they just move in there unless they die. And I just keep it real. And that's how they treat us. That's how they look at us. They look at us seniors like we nothing. Not only that, I heard Monica say about people that's from incarceration. I've been in Lawton all my life. I've been home 20 years. 20 years. I ain't never been back to jail after doing life without parole and gave all of it back except 13 years because the creator let me to come on the street. But my thing is, what happens to people like us that fell through the cracks? I came on weighing 230 pounds, 5 feet, 5'5", man, and they ain't never do nothing for me. I had to survive on the street, homeless by myself until I got my own. Now, what if I went out there and started robbing, killing, and doing the same thing that they designed for me to do? They don't set nothing aside for us. Ain't none of all that. Ain't no return to citizens. We not return to citizens. We people from incarceration, because when we come home, we ain't no citizen. They don't do nothing for us. So what happens to us? The half of the people you see on the street return to citizens that serve their time, and it's designed for them to go right back to jail because they don't have no programs in public housing for nobody.
That's the money, though.
And that's a fact, because I live in here and been going through it. They done tried to lock me up several times when I was in Atlanta, looking for me in the building, talking about I done started chaos, and I ain't even in the city. Now, what happens to us? I mean, really, literally, we can do all this talking, but really happens to us. Now, you talk about a returning citizen that did all this time, did in home, and nobody even pay attention to that. Look what I did as being a returning citizen. But I'm not. I'm a person from incarceration because I created my own pathway. And who helped me do it? Nobody. Now, how can we help those people opposed to keep talking about it? We talking. Let's help them. Let's literally help them. I see them every day when I walk outside this building, man. And it's not helping us. I feel sorry when I see a senior. Seniors that's homeless, you don't see them that much. You know why? They hide in the cracks because they get beat up by old homeless people themselves. They scared and being homeless and seniors. It's crazy. And we got all these vacant units and all these properties. And we keep saying we're going to do better. When? We got vacant properties. I got a whole lot of them in my building. Sean got them. When are we going to literally say, stop it? Let's stop paying rent until you really literally help us. That's all I got to say.
Thanks, Bo, because that really reiterates the call for, the name of this forum. Who do you serve? Who do you plan to serve? Because, it's testimonies like that, like testimonies of Ms. Shaw, Ms. High, Ms. Johnson, Ms. Elliott, Ms. Brunson, myself, all of the people in the audience who are part of an impacted community. We continue to press on, in and out. Elections, you know what I mean, aren't the end of our fights. So, I want to make sure that people that are watching this can also join the fight. And I'm gonna let each representative give contact information, how we can actually produce the solutions instead of just talking. I'll go first. Of course, I'm Reginald Black, and I'm the Advocacy Director for the People for Fairness Coalition, among other things. You can catch us at Twitter at Washington PFFC. Also, check out our website, www.pffcdc.org. And any of the other hosts can give contact information how people can join your fight.
To contact me for anything DC housing related, equity related, and if you want to know about my Park Morton equity plan, you may email me at Park, P-A-R-K Morton, M-O-R-T-O-N, resident, R-E-S-I-D-E-N-T, council, C-O-U-N-C-I-L @gmail.com. And you may follow me on Twitter at AMPLYHIGH. And I'm just gonna tell y'all right now, y'all better be ready for some raw truth and realness about DC Housing Authority. I have no cut cards. When I get to talking about them, sometimes my mouth will slay because they be in the wrong. And also, you may find my business page at facebook.com/High Alert Prep. Please follow High Alert Prep. We keep you abreast of all of the changes that are happening with all of these different diseases, like what happened with COVID, what happened with the hantavirus, the Yara virus, H5N1. Some of y'all probably don't even know about these. Go Google them. It came out this year. Hanta, Yara from Brazil, Hanta from China, H5N1, and the bubonic plague is back. So please follow High Alert Prep on Facebook. Share it with your friends. Thank you. Oh, and we're on Twitter too, at H8ER Prep.
Yes, how can people join the fight for Brookland Manor? Any one of you or all of you can do it.
Ms. Elliott, give out our contact information. One of our volunteers just dropped the information in the chat. There's a website, brooklandmanorcoalition.org, where people can go to learn more about what's happening and donate to organizing efforts. And then you can also follow the organization, which is run by the resident leaders, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And those are in the chat as well.
Thank y'all. Remember, check us out, join the fight, copy down, the information from Brookland Manor, follow Ms. Hyde, follow myself. I don't know if Bo is there, if he has contact information. Yeah, how can people join your fight, Bo? How can they get in contact with you?
Is I'm gonna give you my direct number. I ain't tripping off you getting no email, no Facebook. Come and visit me so you can see what we're going through. I don't want to hear you gonna talk to me from a distance. I don't want to hear all that. My number is 202-907-2629. You know where Garfield Senior Citizen Building is. Visit it. Simple as that. I don't even want to hear all the talking. You know how to get in touch with me from my number. I'm just like Sean. I'm very vocal about what I believe in my senior citizens, veterans, and disabled people in this world. That's it. That's all. That's how you get in touch with me.
I want to thank the Brookland Manor Coalition, Bo Luther from the Garfield Senior Complex, Sean Hyde from the Park Morton Public Housing Complex. Of course, we are going to continue this fight. You know, call Bo, email me, check out our website, PFFC. You know, go to Higher Prep. Go to brooklandmanor.com and join the fight, because it goes on after the election. That's when the rubber hits the road. I want to thank our candidates, Monica Palacio, Will Murrayfield, Jeanné Lewis, Chandler J. Rahman, and Christina Henderson for joining us tonight to convene this conversation of impacted communities. I also want to thank our audience, and remember, join the fight. I'll see you out there. Peace.
Bye, you guys.
Bye-bye.